Welcome to the Rock Music Alliance interview sessions. I am your host, Cole Coleman. On today's episode, you know him as the original keyboard player for the legendary progressive rock band Yes. When we come back, I'll be speaking with Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductee Tony Kaye. Attention guitar players, join the thimble slide revolution and free your slide finger. With its patented shape, you can slide and fret while wearing the thimble slide. Visit thimblesslide.com. That's thimblesslide.com.
I've seen all good people turn their heads each day, so satisfied I'm on my way.
A little sampling of early Yes with Tony Kaye on the keyboards, especially the Hammond organ, as we head into our conversation with Tony Kaye. Tony, what's happening with you right now? Any projects or things you've been working on?
Actually, a project that I've been working on for a long time that's going to be released, an album that's going to be released next year, really to commemorate the 20 years of when the towers fell. It's called End of Innocence, and it's an orchestral rock, a mixture of different things, mostly instrumental. And although Danny, who you know well, has recorded a song, she sings a song on the album, and basically it's a musical progression through that day, and my interpretation on more of an orchestral level.
That's terrific. You should definitely update us on that. I'm happy to put a link out there on the website so people can check it out.
I will. We've got a year and a bit before it comes out, so there's time, and it's something I've been working on since it happened. Strangely enough, I hadn't been playing at all. Music had been sort of left behind and doing other things, and all my equipment was in the garage, and it actually, the day after, prompted me to set it up and start recording again. So it was a great prod to start something new, and it's been going on and off for 20 years.
Wow, it's definitely a long scope project. It's a big project, definitely, from the sounds of it. And
well, big in terms of it took a long time to record. In fact, right at the beginning, I didn't even have a digital performer. I was recording on an 8-track cassette player.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so a lot of that stuff, or the origins of the first recordings, were later transferred to Digital Performer, and gradually built up from there.
Well, it'll be very interesting to check out, and that's for sure. Hey, what current rig are you using with that? Your keyboard rig?
Actually, basically the same rig that I put together for Circa when Billy and I got together and we put Circa together. Although I think originally I was using a real Hammond back then, but of course no more. So that's the rig that I have now, which is basically Roland Phantoms and a Roland Hammond.
Mm-hmm. So Roland Hammond, how does that sound and feel compared to the real thing?
Well, it's nothing like the real thing, and and unfortunately, although I was using I think it was called a B3. It was on my computer, and when we did the Yoso project, which was sort of Circa with Bobby Kimball from Toto, and I was using that, and surprisingly enough, it was a very stable equipment. But I went back to the BK8. Of course, you have to put it through. What I have is now the gizmo that I put it through is a ventilator. You probably heard about it. It is. It's a little box that soups up the BK8 and makes it sound a little more crunchy than on its own.
I see. I've also heard of a virtual Leslie, like a little box. I mean, so perhaps you're using one of those too.
Yes, with the original B3 virtual Hammond. Yeah, it was pretty convincing actually. It was.
So sometimes
but I like the.
No, I was gonna say, sometimes when you put the instrument in the context of the recording, sometimes that adds realism to it as well.
Yeah. I just find this setup, which I actually used last year on the Yes 50th anniversary thing. It worked really well, and of course had to be portable, and it sounded great. Excuse me.
Mm-hmm. Hey, so looking back, what inspired you to get into music, and why did you choose piano?
Whoa, complicated question. Well, I mean, I started very, very young, barely out of a baby, because my grandmother was a piano player. She was a concert classical piano player, and so I was put on her knee while she practiced, and I guess I got it from her.
Yeah, that would inspire you to join in. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's really how it started, and taking classical piano lessons, and gradually, entering competitions and being a classical piano player.
Mm-hmm. So you did start out like with a teacher, like was it a private teacher, or did you go to a school?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, private teacher for years, and many hours of practice, and you really have to find out how much you want to do it by the amount of practice that you have to do for competition.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I had three brothers, all fairly close, and they were all out doing their thing, being crazy, and I was at home having to practice. So you find out whether you really want to do this. Yeah.
Now it's
and
been,
eventually.
Oh, go ahead.
Eventually, the idea was that you eventually go to the Royal School of Music, which which is the whole end result of years of practice. But for some reason, it was probably timing. Rock and roll kind of got in the way of that. It was the beginning of. Actually, it was not so much rock and roll. It was more. I don't know, rockabilly in those days.
Yeah.
Lonnie Donegan and I also played clarinet in a traditional jazz band. And
now, it's been said you were performing by the age of 12. Was that on piano or maybe clarinet?
Mostly piano, yeah. Although I did join my brother's band, which was a skiffle group, and I played a stand-up bass. So
that's interesting.
And that was really, that was the beginning of that. Never took to the bass very well, though.
Yeah, no. For the listeners who may not be familiar with that word, that was skiffle band. Skiffle music.
Skiffle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't hear too much about skiffle bands these days, huh?
Not really. I think it was primarily an English thing, but it was sort of rockabilly, I guess.
Yeah. It sounds fun. It sounds to me. So how did you get into organ, and did you start out with a Hammond or was another type?
Well, I started when I was, I think, 15 or 16. There was a big band that played around where I lived, and it was a 16-piece, Basie and Ellington, but basically a dance band. We played those kind of big dance gigs but played all the great, big band 40s era music. And so that became a little bit of an inspiration and a passion for a while. But at the same time, we were playing pop songs of the day. And that was the beginning of, I think, my initial rendition of Telstar was the beginning of it all. I'm sure it was a big hit here too. And for that song only, I bought a Vox Continental, and that was the organ of the day. The Dave Clark 5 had one, and who else? Eric Burden. I think the Animals. They had something. There was a Farfisa and a Vox Continental, and I went the Vox Continental route, and that was the beginning of it.
Now, I've also heard that you were in a band that backed up Roy Orbison. Can you tell us about that?
That was my very first professional band, and they were sort of pretty well known in England, and they were sort of called a show band, in that there was playing pop music of the day, but within the band structure there was usually someone who was a comedian. Who happened to be the trumpet player in this band, and he was kind of goofy, and consequently, it was called a show band. It wasn't exactly what I wanted to do, but it was the beginning. And we toured Europe, went to Germany, did gigs over there, went to Turkey, and played backup for different people. Um, and then we got to back Roy Orbison on a tour, his, I think, first tour of England.
That must have been fun.
It was, yeah. It was everything that you expected, to do.
We'll be right back with Tony Kaye, but check out these important words from the Rock Music Alliance and your chance to join and vote in the Rock Music Awards. It's time that rock music has its own awards, the RMA Awards, its own scholarships, charity events, and more. And only you can make it happen by joining the Rock Music Alliance and voting in the RMA Awards. You can join as either a musician, an industry professional, or if you just love rock music, you can join as a patron of rock. Everyone can join, and everyone gets to vote. Join the Rock Music Alliance. Go to rockmusicalliance.com. That's rockmusicalliance.com.
I'm Tony Kaye. Join the Rock Music Alliance.
Another sampling of Early Yes with Tony Kaye as we head back to our conversation. So how did you meet up with Chris Squire and John Anderson?
Well, I was playing... I eventually moved to London and started playing around the scene, a couple of bands, psychedelic bands, and some Pink Floyd type bands, and eventually started playing with one of the guitar player who, what was the band he played with? Steve Marriott's band. The Faces.
Oh, the Faces. Yeah, that's a name. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know the name.
And he formed his own band, and I started, really my London debut with that band, and ended up at various rock and roll venues in the West End of London. One of them called the Shafts Club, which was next to the Marquee Club on Wardour Street. Mm-hmm. And it was the great gathering place for, every musician that, wanted to play the Marquee Club.
Yeah.
And so we used to go there, hang out. It was a room about as big as your living room, It was and packed with musicians that you couldn't help but bump into and become friends.
Over here,
and that was.
Yeah. I would say over here, where I live, so that would have been the Rain Tree. The equivalent was the Rain Tree in Torrance.
Right. Yeah. Or the Rainbow in Hollywood.
Hollywood. Yeah.
Except that was bigger. But yeah, all the musicians hung out there, and it was a short distance to the local pub, which was called the Ship, where all the musicians also hung out. But it was at the Shafts Club that I met Chris and John.
So it sounds like it's pretty likely that they were aware of you at that point. They've probably seen you with the Faces.
I'm not sure. I really don't know whether they were aware of what any of us were doing. Although Chris and Peter Banks, and I guess the original drummer that we started rehearsing with, of course, had a band together anyway. And that really was the beginning of Yes.
Yeah. And now at that moment, their group was called Mabel Greer's Toy Shop. Is that right?
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. And so they did they audition with you, or they just invited you into the band right away?
Yeah. Well, it was very casual. I seem to remember we were just hanging out together and talking and saying, well, let's rehearse. Yeah.
Very casual.
Yeah. And actually, we the owner of the Shafts and the guys who owned the Marquee became friends, and they kind of supported the band at the beginning, and after some rehearsal, we eventually played the Marquee Club, which was really the top place to play, and was a big opening for us.
Yeah, definitely. So at this time that you're playing the Marquee Club, had they changed the name to Yes at that point, and how did that come about?
Oh, yeah. The band had been renamed. Peter, the guitar player, had thought of, typical band thing, trying to come up with names. I don't even remember my suggestion. It was that bad. But most of the names were bad. And actually, I was never that fond of Yes, right? At the beginning. Seemed like a strange name for me. And, most bands were the something.
Yeah, I've noticed same thing. Like the very first time I heard of Yes, to me it was just like, yeah, like isn't there something more to it than that? Yes, what? And so yeah, it was definitely
right.
If you don't know the music behind the name, it sounds kind of strange, But I've noticed, as I'm sure you have, the name of a band, it becomes the band. Like whatever the band is, it lends its power to the name. So it's great if you
exactly.
If you can come up with a compelling name, that's great. But if you don't, that can be okay too, because whatever you are as a band, that your name will take on that characteristic. So like right now, when people say Yes, they're thinking prog rock, close to the edge. They're thinking this immense music. So that's the power of it all.
Yeah, that's exactly right. But I thought that, before they were well known, because I supported them on various occasions, that Pink Floyd was the greatest name ever.
It's a compelling name. Yeah, it's like Pink Floyd.
Yeah.
What's this about? It's compelling.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, when I heard Pink Floyd music, just like I was saying, then that heavy, big, brooding type of sound, became encapsulated in their name. So now when you hear Pink Floyd, that's what you get. You get that heavy, big sound.
It did, yes, and the connotation of their blues influence too was in the name. It was part of it, just like the Rolling Stones or the Who. It had that connotation of blues. Yes. Surprisingly, it didn't have that connotation.
Yeah. So it sounded like Yes was essentially Peter's suggestion.
Yes, it was. he thought of the name, and I seem to remember asking him, but why? And his answer was, well, it is the most positive word in the English language. So
that's terrific. That's a very philosophical point.
Yeah, you couldn't knock that down, really.
So during those first years with Yes, you're working with Peter on guitar. How did you guys get along?
We were really good friends. I mean, I guess that the change around came on a musical perspective from John. It was certainly a much sort of raunchier, rockier band back then, even though we were doing, I guess, the sort of progressive arrangements. But we weren't really doing original material. We're doing, remakes of other songs. And it was a much sort of, and of course Peter was he was a pretty raunchy guitar player, certainly compared to Steve, and I was doing that Hammond thing that, and it seemed to go together at that time. It obviously wasn't what John and Chris wanted. And it was very sad to see Peter go because, we worked really well together.
Yeah.
I was watching some of the earlier videos that were, filmed in Germany at the Beat Club, and it was pretty amazing. What we were doing back then.
Yeah, it is. And you did sound good together, in those early recordings I've heard. There's definitely a synergy going on with you guys. I would say, progressive rock fans and musicians have said in more recent years that Peter is an undercredited, unsung hero of progressive rock, and that he really provided the blueprint for the progressive rock guitar player. Yeah. I was just going to...
It's funny how history seems to make a difference to the way that people are thought of.
Yeah. Hindsight, as they say, is 20/20. But you have the knowledge, that comes with the years. So from our perspective, we look back in time at those days, and you have, you can see where people really contributed at the time. But was he? He
was underrated.
Yeah,
definitely underrated guitar player. Of course, very influenced by Pete Townsend.
Okay. Oh. Yeah, I can see that.
And there was a lot of Pete in him, and the craziness too. The onstage craziness, which was not particularly Yes-like. Or what became Yes-like.
Did he have an urge to smash his guitars?
Always doing it. Yes. Yes, especially the low ceilings in clubs, on club stages.
So, was Peter a much different guitar player than the other guitar players of the day? Did you notice a difference with him?
Of guitar players in other bands?
Yeah.
He was unpredictable. You didn't really know what he was going to do a lot of the time, which was probably one of the things that was, Yes, generally was very stuck in, what had been created. And a lot of bands, I think, have much more free reign within the context of the songs.
Yeah.
Pink Floyd being The Who being a good example, or the Stones. I mean, all bands that I used to go to listen to a lot at the time. They were not predictable. Yes, John and Chris liked to stay, within what had been recorded.
Mm-hmm.
So Peter was a little unpredictable in that respect, which was great for me because I was a little like that too, and we tended to work off each other.
Right. Yeah, I could definitely see that. Yeah. So when Peter died in 2013, how did you hear about it, and how did it hit you?
It's always surprising and always sad, and we kept in touch over the years, although during his final years, I think he tended to be a little bit of a recluse. I didn't really. I think the last time I saw him was on the Union tour in Los Angeles, which was early 90s. And I think I saw him once at a Yes convention after that, but I didn't really keep in touch, very closely. And I think, he became a little reclusive, but it was a shock,
Yeah, I can imagine. Kind of the first one of your bandmates passing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You're never prepared for it, and something definitely goes. It disappears when a member of the band, a musician, is no longer there.
Mm-hmm.
It was the same thing with Chris.
Yeah.
Because you are like a family, after so many years of being together. Although with Peter, it was a fairly short amount of time, but still.
Yeah. Well, I've found even a short amount of time, but you guys achieved something great during that time. So I found that musicians I've worked with, even if it was for a short time, you still have a bond. Because you oftentimes have gone through some ordeal together as a band. Whether it's gigging or whether it's putting a new music together, it leaves a deep impression on you. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of memories and a lot of history and a lot of stories, and it's always a shock.
Yeah. So I want to mention for the listeners that Peter has a posthumous release right now with David Cross called Crossover, and under the artist name of David Cross and Peter Banks. And Tony, you're a guest player on it. Right. How many tracks are you on, and what's the style like?
I haven't heard it, and I did actually get on the computer today to find out what I actually played.
Find out how it came out.
Yeah, and it's very good. Obviously, it's taken from ideas and ramblings of original sort of Peter ideas, and I think what David Cross has done is just really good.
Thinking back to Peter's last album with Yes, Time and a Word, what was it like to put that music together, the music of Time and a Word and the Yes album? Just was it difficult, or did it flow very quickly from you guys? Was it fun, or was it a challenge?
Well, the band was sort of pretty established, but new, and I don't think anyone really thought very carefully about what we were doing. You kind of just did it.
Yeah. It sounds like fun, really.
And it was a fun time, and it got a little more serious later. I can't exactly say the fun stopped when Peter left, but it certainly changed.
Yeah.
And I originally saw Steve. I recommended Steve. I saw Steve Howe was playing in a band at the Speakeasy in London, and he was playing pretty much straight out rock at that point. And I thought, probably a really good replacement for Peter.
Mm-hmm.
Rock guitar player. Yeah.
Yeah, and really he was. I mean, because if you listen to the style of guitar playing that Peter was and what Steve Howe is doing, there's really quite similar. I mean, Steve's taking it to another level, but they really were, in my mind, they were actually a very good match at that moment in time.
They were, and of course, Steve progressed so much and so quickly too. Yeah. So so with Steve Howe in the band, it's been well documented that there were some mounting pressures between you and Steve as things progressed and as he progressed as a guitar player, and which ultimately led to your departure from them in 1971, and that was happening around the rehearsals for Fragile. So I was just kind of wondering about that. Like, how did was it hard to let go of that moment and walk away from it all, or what was happening at that moment? Well, we were Steve and I were really good friends, and he actually phoned me a couple of weeks ago and said, I hope you don't mind. I got this autobiography coming out soon, and I kind of got into when we used to take drugs and play and drive around the countryside and with my guitar, and that's how we came up with Yours Is No Disgrace, Seeing All Good People. I hope you don't mind.
I'm doing a tell-all, and I'm going to tell everyone what we did.
I said, well, obviously the book's out next week, so I don't think I have much of a choice.
Yeah, you can't really tell them. Don't take that part out.
Yeah, but that's really our memory, my memory about the recording of the Yes album.
Yeah.
Steve and I tooling around the countryside on acid. It was pretty cool.
That's interesting for sure, man. That's all the time we have for today's episode. Look for part 2 of my interview with Tony Kaye, where we talk about his time with Badger, Badfinger, David Bowie, and his return to Yes. Visit thimblesslide.com for the guitar slide that frees your finger. It allows you to slide and fret while wearing it. And visit rockmusicalliance.com and join the Rock Music Alliance so you can vote in the RMA Awards. For the Rock Music Alliance, I'm Cole Coleman. Be well, stay well, and join the Rock Music Alliance.